Leitner, and welcome to Rochester Rising, where we amplify the stories of Rochester entrepreneurs. Welcome to episode 164 of the podcast today. So today on the show, I had the pleasure of talking with Eva Glamaris Cruz Pena. This Puerto Rican-born entrepreneur moved to Rochester a few years ago via Portland, Oregon. So today on the show, we talk about her home-based online business, where she teaches emotional mastery, executive and corporate leadership skills, and diversity and inclusion consulting to clients around the world. On the show today, we learn more about her business and her love of nature and painting, how she's navigated multiple career changes throughout her path, and her real passion for helping women to become whole and fully integrated, and for performing diversity and inclusion work within her community. So a reminder to all of you, you can find our podcast on our website at rochesterrising.org. We're also on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and on YouTube, so you can find us at any of those locations. But really the best way to stay up to date with all of our podcasts, all of our article and video content, is through our weekly newsletter. This is the Collider newsletter, which is the nonprofit that we are a part of. It comes out every Sunday morning and keeps you up to date with all the events, education, and other storytelling taking place in the Rochester entrepreneurial ecosystem. So check it out, sign up, and get on the list. All right, so now on to the podcast with Eva Glamaris Cruz Pena. All right, well, thanks for being here today. I appreciate your time at the end of January on a gloomy day. So thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Amanda.
So yeah, I wanted to start out just by asking you, what's your favorite leisure non-work activity to do?
Oh gosh, you caught me off guard. Let's see. I love nature. So I love going on walks when the weather is nice. And yeah, I love being in nature. I love doing that. I love painting. And so I do that, but I do all those things during like the spring, summer, and fall. Like in the winter, I kind of hibernate.
I say hibernation. Yeah.
I don't do any of those things, but yeah, I love doing those.
Awesome. I am not creative at all in terms of painting or doing anything. The most creative thing I can do is cross stitch, because I can look at it and be like, okay.
Well, then you are creative. It just expresses in a different way.
It expresses in a different way. I feel like the writing and storytelling kind of fills in that
that's also
gap.
Creativity.
Yeah. I found baking and cooking to be my...
Also creativity. Look at you. You're so creative already.
I guess so. Yeah. Very true. Awesome. Well, I feel like you have quite a story to tell, have many, career changes that you've navigated through, which is, like we were talking about before we started, something that's really scary to a lot of people, especially to know how to navigate that, what that looks like, and how to know when it's time to make a career change. So I feel like a lot of people just sit in where they are and just are unhappy, which is never what we want in life. So, like I said, you've done quite a lot from, getting a bachelor's of science in nursing, being a hematology nurse, being a pastor, a chaplain in the U.S. Air Force Reserves, and now a certified professional coach. So, if you wouldn't mind, could you kind of walk through, each of those stages and kind of talk through how you knew when it was time to make a change in your career path, and how did you kind of navigate through those decisions?
Well, we don't have enough time for that, so I'll do my best. Okay, so I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and I showed lots of leadership abilities and creative abilities from the beginning, and so I consider myself a multi-passionate entrepreneur. Even as a businesswoman, my businesses takes on different expressions. So I grew up and I wanted to be all kinds of things. I wanted to be a marine biologist because I love the sea, and I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to bring babies into the world. I wanted to birth life. I also wanted to be a flight attendant because I wanted to travel the world. So all those things were very much in alignment with my values, which are like adventure and freedom and love. Those are my 3 top core values. And I went to school and I took so many classes. Like my bachelor ended up taking me 6 years because I was hopping and skipping. And I ended up in nursing. And then on my junior year, I came to the Mayo Clinic for an internship. And I remember landing in the middle of the airport in a cornfield, and I was like, I didn't know this place existed. And I came to work at Mayo and loved it. And then when it was time to go back for my senior year, I had an offer from the Mayo Clinic to come back. And I had been working in the hematology department, so I came back as a nurse. And I started working as a nurse at the Mayo Clinic as a hematology nurse and then as a postpartum nurse. I loved what I did. I have always loved working with women. I've always loved taking care of people, being able to serve. And so I thought this would be an expression of that. But a few years into it, a few things happened. One, I noticed this was a very, very white city, and there wasn't a lot of diversity. And I found myself, if not the one, a few of people of color in the spaces where I was. And that was actually pretty challenging. And number 2, I started to feel that I wanted to care for people in a more holistic way, not just in the physical aspect. So I started to envision what that would look like. And at the time, I was attending church. I had grown up in the church. And so I figured perhaps I needed to take care of people in the spiritual sense. And so I was here for 7 years before moving to Portland, Oregon in the West Coast to do my master's degree. And I went to Multnomah University, a seminary in Portland, Oregon, and I completed my master's in theology, my master's of divinity. And the idea was that eventually I would either be a chaplain, so I would work in the hospital and I would be able to kind of bridge those 2 passions, or I would end up in a church as a pastor because my background and I grew up in the church. And so I did that, and towards the end, I joined the Air Force Reserve as a military chaplain. I was assigned to Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. So I would go to school during the semester, and in the summer, I would fly down to Texas and I'd be in Texas for more than 40 days doing my time, my time as a chaplain. It was a beautiful experience, but it was really, really challenging. The same struggles that I had faced when I was here as a nurse, being the minority in a predominantly white space, was the same challenge that I found myself when I went to seminary. And then added to that was the layer of the conservative Christian that says that women are not supposed to be leaders in the church. So it was pretty challenging. And then in the military, there's a lot of there's a lot of that too. And there's a lot of power dynamics. I came back and I felt like I wasn't done. And so I figured I'm a lifelong learner. And I figured, well, what if I incorporate also mental health? I had already been noticing some patterns, not only in my life, but in the life of the people around me. And I started to notice how important it was for mental health to be brought in the picture, whether it was in the physical aspect or in the spiritual aspect. And so I graduated in May of 2011, and in August I had enrolled in a master's of counseling. And so I did that while I was a chaplain in the Air Force, and I loved being a mental health student. And I was a counselor at the school, at the college. I worked with women in the college that were survivors of sexual trauma. It was very, very intense. And then when I was ready to graduate, I was offered a job as a pastor in a large church in Portland, Oregon. And I thought that was like my dream job. I would be able to take care of people in the spiritual sense, in the emotional sense, in the physical sense. Like, it was, to me, at that time, that was the perfect job. So I started that while still in the Air Force Reserves. And soon I realized that it wasn't the place for me. It was an eye-opening experience to be the only Latina women pastor among 12 white men. It was also very challenging. So trying to assert my voice, trying to speak for the women of the church who composed more than 60% of the body, and they didn't have any representation at the higher level of the church. And so I started to feel very, very restless. And I knew it wasn't because of my competence or my abilities. I knew it wasn't because of my personality. Like, I was doing a really good job. The women loved it. But I started to feel really, really restless. And I had achieved already a lot. I already had 2 master's degrees. I had worked in the military. I was very successful. I was at the top of my class. I delivered a graduation speech. So I knew it wasn't my performance. It wasn't my competence. I knew there was something inside of me, like at a soul level, that was unfulfilled. And so I had a mental breakdown one day, and I had been working with a psychiatrist teaching for him at the program, and I called him up and I said, Warner, I need to see you because I just had a mental breakdown, and I know it's emotionally, it's connected to the emotional realm. And so he saw me and he said, Eva, being a pastor is going to kill you because you were not meant for this. Like, there's something bigger out there for you, and you need to find out what it is, but you also need to take care of your soul.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll go through life restless, and you'll continue achieving great things because you're very good at what you do, but you're not going to be fulfilled. And so that got me set in a path of self-discovery and really trying to figure out what I wanted to do in the world and how I wanted to express myself. And so a few months into that kind of journey, my daughter had gotten sick a year before. I became really ill during that time too, and nobody could understand what was going on. We went to so many specialists and doctors. Nobody could figure out what it was. So it felt very chaotic at the time. I felt like everything was crumbling down, even though I had achieved all this success. And so my daughter was ill. I was ill. I decided to quit my work as pastor. I had finished my time in the military, and I had a crisis of faith too. It was like everything just came. Yeah, everything came crumbling down.
Yeah.
But it was the breakdown that led to the breakthrough, that led to the most beautiful transformative process for me. And during that time, I had already started my coaching certification. The reason why I had done that was because I was trying to bring all of who I was into whatever work I did. And I felt that coaching was that space that allowed me to be who I was and actually take care of people in a very holistic way, without being attached to a modality of like a theology or psychology or the physical realm. And so it was in this coaching space that I was able to, what I call unravel, unfold, and unbecome, so I could become again and kind of integrate all the pieces of myself that I had left behind along the journey because I was trying to adapt to what culture and society were telling me I needed to be in a certain space. And so because I loved it so much, I thought, well, I am going to actually try this. And I am going to become a coach, and I'm going to help women just reintegrate and become whole. Wholeness is one of the things that I talk about in every space that I'm in because I love it so much. And we are able to not only find fulfillment, but be our best version of ourselves when we're integrated, and when we can bring all those aspects of ourselves into the whole. I call it coming home, right? Coming home to ourselves. So let's see, in the journey, where are we? We're about like 2016. So
We got 4 more years.
yes, we're almost there. So we were at the end of the rope in terms of health. And I remember the traditional medical community wasn't able to figure anything out. And so I found a functional medicine doctor whom I had already done enough research to kind of know what was going on. So I showed up and I said, I think my daughter and I have mold intoxication, and it's presenting itself in this different ways. So can you do the testing? She did a lot of genetic testing, and it came out that we had been intoxicated with black mold. And she said, my recommendation is that you leave everything that you own behind and you get out of Oregon.
Yeah.
And so that was in August. And in October of 2017, my family and I got in the car and drove back to Minnesota, where my husband's in-laws live. And they said, well, just come here and rebuild here. So it was a very intense period of time in my life, full of grief and loss. But also it was a beautiful time of just getting very clear in the things that really matter. And knowing that my essence wasn't shaken, I was still me, and I could rebuild anywhere in the world, and that things weren't that important. And so we arrived back in Rochester. I came kind of kicking and screaming because I knew the cold was not going to be kind to me.
Yeah.
And so I have been here since 2017, and I work from home. I have my online business, and I do a few things. When we're talking about creativity and how it expresses itself, I'm a multi-passionate entrepreneur, so I do a few things. I teach emotional mastery, which is the alignment of the mental, the emotional, and the physical, so that people can actually achieve success. It's kind of like a rewiring of the brain. And so I love teaching that, and I love my clients that are invested in becoming emotionally intelligent, emotionally resilient. So that's one expression of my business. I also coach in the executive and corporate world, and I have clients all over the U.S. where I help them with leadership skills and developing the raw talent in the industry to come up. I love that part too. That's a very different kind of flavor to the coaching that I do. I also do diversity and inclusion consulting, and I teach white women how to become aware, willing, and committed to dismantling the power and fear dynamics that keep certain groups of people invisible. I also love that kind of work. And it's very intense work, but I love it with all my heart. And then the last thing I do is my latest fun kind of business. I'm a board partner with Monade, and that is an MLM company. And I do that because in every single expression of business that I do, my goal is to guide women to remember who they are, facilitating their healing, awakening, and rising. And I've been able to heal my relationship with my hair and really support it to be the best it can be. And so that's a really fun business that I do also. So that's 2020.
But yeah, going back to, empowering women and like our, hair, your face as we're getting older. Now I have to include myself in that since I'm 35 this year or last year. You become more aware of, and it's, if you don't feel fully confident or, whole, then you can't even try and play at full 100% of your capacity when you're, struggling anyway.
Yeah, and it's all about self-love, right? Loving ourselves for who we are deep inside, and then making sure that then we are supporting our body, which is the largest vessel that we have, that we're supporting it in the best way so that it can carry out the work that our soul is here to do. And so I'm I'm very passionate about that.
So what was kind of your passion for this kind of executive coaching and, you know, making people aware of being diverse and inclusive and the value of that in society?
Yeah. So back in 2016, when I decided that I was going to work for myself and be a business owner, I call them synchronicities. I ended up meeting this business coach, this man, and in a conversation, he shared with me how he had a client who had a great heart for his company, but he was having a really hard time connecting with the workers. So the CEO was a white male Caucasian, right? His workforce was half Hispanic, half Russian, and there were some Vietnamese. And so the language was already a barrier in the communication, right? And so I came in and I said, well, what can we do to make sure that we bridge that gap? And he said, well, do you want to like envision what it would look like? And I was like, sure. So we started talking and I met with the CEO, and he was an amazing, amazing guy with a big heart for this company and the workers. And he would rather have talent arise from within the company than have to hire out. And I met with the workforce, and I loved the people. So we created a curriculum for developing the leaders, for developing the talent within the company. And I then became a liaison between the CEO, between management and the workforce. And I was in-house for 2 years. So I came in every Monday and Tuesday, and I did coaching sessions with all the leads in Spanish, and then with the Russian people in English and with the Vietnamese people in English, but really developed them, taught them essential skills of leadership, essential skills of communication, conflict resolution, and hosted these classes for management and the workforce, and kind of just bridge communication. And I absolutely love that. And then kind of became an advisor to the CEO in best practices. Love that so much. So there was a need, and I saw the need, and I could envision what it will look like in its best form, and that's how that started. So even though I'm here in Minnesota, I still coach them, and so we do it now online. And so on Mondays, they're my clients, and I see them.
It's the beauty of the virtual world, right?
Yes, I do all that online. In terms of my work as a diversity and inclusion consultant, that kind of came out partly because I had a very misfortunate incident here in the city in one of the stores where I was physically assaulted by a manager in the store, and experienced racial profiling and discrimination, and it was really, really painful. And I wanted to create something beautiful out of it, and mainly bring awareness to the community about these things. And so I just went inwards and just kind of followed my intuition and my desire to see a world that is equitable, where everybody has access to resources so things can be fairly and people can be accurately represented, a world that is inclusive. And so I created this masterclass for white women coaches, healers, and creatives. And I have clients in this class from Australia. I have clients from the UK. I have clients in Canada, in Bali, in Croatia. And so it's an amazing class, and to see these women grapple with issues of like privilege and fragility and unconscious bias, and then actually invest and commit to doing the work, and now seeing how their businesses are taking on that expression is actually one of the most rewarding things I've ever felt.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And that's your sacred inclusion classes?
Yes.
Right? Okay. I was scanning my notes for it, and like I knew I had it somewhere on there. That was another question I wanted to ask you, because like we were talking about, the virtual world, you can have clients all over the place. So, you know, when you're doing your marketing and your Instagram is beautiful,
Thank
all
you.
your photos, and it makes me want to go travel and do all these things. And so how do you connect with clients both like all over the world and local? What strategies have been effective for you?
Well, I believe a lot in authenticity, in being who you are, and then just putting that authenticity out into the world, and the right people for you will show up. I also am a big believer in building relationships. My clients, I have personal relationships with all of them. And that's something that perhaps I wouldn't be able to do if I was a therapist, or perhaps if I was a nurse. So I have personal relationships with my clients. I know who they are. I know their families, because I'm deeply invested in that. I'm also really good at boundaries. So I feel like that's important to mention. And I have a very strong, flexible boundaries. But even in the way that I write, and when I share stuff on social media, I usually have a disclaimer or a boundary at the end of the post that says how I am looking towards engaging with the post. If I am looking for a conversation, if it's just my thought, if I am looking for an exchange of ideas, because I need to be mindful of my own energy. And so I'm out there engaging with people every day and meeting new people, and then word of mouth is something that helps too. When people really love your work and when you give value to people, people tend to talk about you and introduce you to other people, and that's usually how my work has spread out, is word of mouth. And currently my website's down because it's being redesigned and whatever, but I haven't had a need for it, because people find me, whether it is on Instagram and Facebook, and we connect, we establish a relationship, and we figure out what it is and how they want to interact with me, and then if I can provide that value, I do, or if not, then I refer them to somebody else.
So when you're looking at your business for this year, what are kind of your goals? What do you want to accomplish in 2020?
Yeah. So when I was thinking about 2020, 3 different words came to mind. That was one: consistency, courageous, and confidence. And they all wrapped beautiful around the word visibility. So this year for me is more about being visible, and that means putting myself out there a little bit more, and especially in like real life relationships. So I'm trying to make connections in the city and meet other women that are doing really amazing things, and just help my work become more visible. And there are really cool opportunities happening. So this year I'm going to be traveling to Puerto Rico to be part of the Women's Economic Forum.
Awesome.
The Caribbean edition, and I'm really, really excited about that. And yeah, there are other opportunities in the works for my work to get out there and have more of an impact.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I have some final questions to take us to the end that I've been asking to everybody, and they change for 2020, so you get the new set. What are you reading or listening to right now?
Okay. So I am reading a book on self-compassion. It's part of a mastermind assignment, and I think it's called The Art of Self-Compassion. I don't remember the name, but that's one of the things that I'm reading. But on Audible, I am listening to a book called The Book of Self-Worth and Knowing, and it's by a man called a man by the name of Paul Selig, and it's a channeled text. So I'm highly spiritual, and this text it's quite amazing. So it's life-changing. So those are the two books that I'm kind of
Very cool.
reading, listening.
I feel like it takes me seriously 2 months to listen to a book on tape.
Oh yeah, it does to me too. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not the only one then. I just get it from the library, and I have to keep like renewing it over and over again.
I used to have a really long commute, and then that worked really well because I would drive for more than an hour, so that worked really well. And then moving here, everything is so close that I haven't used the app that much.
Yeah, no, that's the same. When I'm like driving, which is extremely rare somewhere, then I'll listen to podcasts or, you know, my book on tape, but it's very rare. Yeah, I've been listening to this one for it's been 6 weeks at this point. I'm halfway through it. So anyway, what is your favorite location in Rochester?
Oh.
And you can say home. That would be mine.
Let's see. Well, besides going to TJ Maxx weekly.
I've not been to Marshall's yet, and now I feel like we need to ask them for a sponsorship for this.
So when it's spring, summer, and fall, I love being outside. And there's a route that I walk around my house that it's really, really quiet and beautiful. So I love that spot, but I also love going down to, I don't know where that place is. It's like the Mayo area, southwest, and there's I don't know, I park my car and I get off and I walk along the river, and that's just really, really beautiful and calming. And so I love water. If I lived in Puerto Rico, I would be telling you it was the ocean. So anything that has to do with water, where I can see it and hear it, I love that.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I grew up around a river, very dirty river, but I still you still want, you hear it, and it's very soothing. And
yes, it is.
That comes with its own issues, like flooding and lovely stuff like that. But, you have a strong tie to it when you grow up around it. What has been one key resource you found locally that's kind of helped you with your business? And it could be person or...
Yeah, well, I am very grateful to Emily Watkins, the new owner of the Rochester Women magazine. That relationship is really special. I hold it dear. And she's kind of tells me where some events are in the city, and then I show up and meet amazing women. And the city, this isn't a big city like Portland that was 2 million people, right? So you end up seeing the same people in events over and over. But I like it because I get to build those relationships. So, yeah.
And the final question, is there one thing you wish you'd done differently with your business or with, anything?
No. I think that, there are some days that I, have I wish I would have done this, but in reality, I feel like every single experience that we've gone through has made us who we are. And, sure, I would have done things differently, perhaps, I don't know, strategically wise or whatever. But I don't have any regrets. And I love that the person who I am today is a result of all those experiences. And perhaps they weren't the most conventional. It didn't take me the most conventional route, but I wasn't born to be conventional. So I think conventional is boring. So no, I would not.
So, totally agree. Our experiences definitely shape us and what we're bringing forward to the world.
Yes.
That was my final question. I'll ask you for any final thoughts, and where can people find you and your business?
So Instagram, my handle is Eva Glamaris, EvaGlamaris. And it's the same on Facebook. And so people usually will send me a message or a DM on Instagram, and that works for right now. And that's how people can find me.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for allowing me the space to have this amazing conversation.
Thanks so much to Eva for being on the podcast today, and you can find her on Instagram and Facebook under the handle Eva Glamaris. So you can find links to that in our show notes as well. So we're always looking for great Rochester-based entrepreneurs to have on the podcast. So if you know someone with a great story to tell, let us know and send us an email at rochesterrising@gmail.com. That's a wrap for the podcast today. Be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen into your podcast content, and we'll be back here next Wednesday with a brand new episode.